What happens when a self-proclaimed HOA enforcer tries to strip a veteran of the very jacket he wore while serving his country, and then finds herself face-to-face with his old Special Forces unit? "Take that jacket off right now. It doesn't belong here." Those were the words that broke the quiet of a sunny Saturday afternoon in a suburban cul-de-sac in Greensboro, North Carolina. Neighbors watering their lawns, kids pedaling scooters, and even the mail carrier paused mid-step as their eyes turned to the confrontation happening near the freshly paved sidewalk. On one side stood Paula Greaves, clipboard tucked under her arm, her expression sharp and unyielding. She had lived in this community for over 15 years, and in her mind had become the guardian of its order. As the vice president of the neighborhood's HOA, she saw herself as the last line of defense against anything or anyone that disrupted the standards she believed held everything together. On the other side was Andre Kalin, a 41-year-old Army veteran who had just moved in with his wife and 7-year-old daughter. He was dressed in jeans, sneakers, and his camouflage jacket. To him, it wasn't just an item of clothing. It was a layer of identity, a reminder of long nights in desert heat, dangerous missions with his unit, and the quiet pride of service that never left a soldier. Even after the uniform came off, Andre froze for a moment, more out of disbelief than anger. "Excuse me?" he asked, his voice calm, though his jaw flexed slightly. "You heard me," Paula snapped. "That military gear makes this neighborhood look unsafe. We don't dress like that here. We have standards." The air shifted. A few neighbors stopped pretending to fiddle with their hedges and started listening closely. A teenager lowered his basketball to hear better. Andre, standing steady, looked at her as though trying to decide whether she was serious or simply looking for a fight. "Ma'am," he finally said, his voice even and respectful, "this is just a jacket. I served in the Army for years. It's a part of me. Nothing unsafe about it." But Paula wasn't interested in explanations. Service or not, that's not appropriate for this neighborhood. We keep things respectable here. Take it off. Andre felt the sting in her words. He had faced worse moments where his life had hung by a thread in places far from home. But somehow, standing here on a suburban sidewalk in the country he served, this hit differently, not because of the demand itself, but because it came from someone who had never sacrificed, never known the weight behind that jacket, yet felt entitled to diminish it. A neighbor, an older man named Harvey Simmons, shuffled closer with his watering can, trying to break the tension. "Hey now, Paula, come on. It's just a jacket. Let the man be." Paula shot him a look that silenced him. She wasn't used to being challenged, and certainly not in front of a growing audience. Andre looked around, noticing the crowd gathering. He knew this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about every neighbor watching to see how he handled the moment. He straightened his shoulders and looked directly at Paula. "With all due respect," he said, "I've worn this jacket in places you can't imagine. Places where friends of mine gave everything they had so people back home could argue about things like lawns and mailboxes in peace. If you think I'm taking it off because it offends you, you're mistaken." The words hung in the air. For the first time, Paula's face faltered, her confidence flickering. But then she tightened her grip on her clipboard and doubled down. "We'll see what the HOA board has to say about that," she muttered. Scribbling furiously, Andre could have pushed back harder. He could have raised his voice. Instead, he turned, adjusted his jacket, and walked calmly back toward his driveway, where his daughter waited on the porch steps, her wide eyes taking in every word. He gave her a reassuring smile, though inside something stirred, an old instinct, the feeling of standing your ground without raising your weapon. The neighbors stood still, the tension not fully broken, as Paula stormed off down the sidewalk, muttering about rules and appearances. But beneath the surface, something had shifted in the neighborhood that afternoon. Respect, suspicion, pride, and shame had all collided on that strip of pavement, and nothing would be quite the same again. But Paula wasn't finished yet, and neither was Andre. Because what happened next would ripple far beyond a single jacket. To understand what happened next, you need to know who Paula Greaves was in that neighborhood. She wasn't just a longtime resident. She had practically made herself the face of the HOA. People joked, sometimes quietly, that Paula had two identities: the friendly neighbor who baked banana bread during the holidays, and the HOA officer who could spot a mailbox chipped by 2 shades of paint from 100 yards away. Her house sat on the corner lot, perfectly manicured, shutters painted navy blue with military precision, and a driveway free of so much as a stray leaf. Paula lived for appearances. She believed that order kept property values high, and she carried that belief like a badge of honor. Some admired her attention to detail, but most people just tolerated it. They didn't want trouble. They knew better than to argue when Paula came knocking with her clipboard. Andre Kalen didn't know that yet. He and his wife Renee had only moved in a few weeks earlier. Their daughter, Naya Kalen, had just started 2nd grade at Jefferson Elementary. The Kalens had chosen Greensboro for its quiet neighborhoods and good schools. After years of military service, Andre wanted stability, a safe place to raise his daughter. A home that didn't feel temporary. Their first weeks had been filled with unpacking. Trips to Home Depot and neighborhood waves that felt polite but distant. Andre had noticed the way people studied him, sometimes with curiosity, sometimes with hesitation. He figured it was normal. A new family always attracted stares. Renee, ever the optimist, reminded him that settling in took time. "Give them a chance," she'd say while folding boxes in the garage. "People need to get used to new faces. You'll see. It'll be fine." But even she noticed how quickly Paula seemed to circle their home. Within the first week, Paula had stopped by twice. Once to remind them about trash bin placement, and another time to suggest that their grass was half an inch too long compared to the HOA handbook standard. Renee smiled through both encounters, though Andre could see the irritation behind her polite nods. "You'd think we moved on to a military base with all these rules," he joked one evening while flipping burgers on their new grill. Renee laughed, but replied quietly, "The difference is you actually respected your commanding officers." She tilted her head toward Paula's corner house. "This one, she just likes the power." Andre didn't disagree. What made it harder was how neighbors reacted, or rather, didn't react. Everyone knew Paula was strict. Some whispered about her confrontations with past residents. The young couple whose garden gnome she declared unapproved decor. The retired teacher who was fined for keeping a flag out a day past the holiday. People rolled their eyes about her antics in private. But when it came to standing up to her, silence ruled the day. Andre wasn't the kind of man to be rattled by small-town authority. He had spent his adult life in war zones where silence could mean life or death. But he also wasn't a man who went looking for unnecessary fights. His goal was to build a peaceful life, not stir trouble. Still, that jacket confrontation left him unsettled in a way he couldn't quite shake. Renee noticed. Later that night, as he sat at the kitchen table scrolling through his phone, she reached across and touched his hand. "She doesn't matter," Renee said softly. "People like her look for control because they don't have it anywhere else." "Let it go," Andre sighed. "It's not about her. It's about what she said. About what it means when someone like her thinks they can strip away something that's part of who I am. I wore this jacket on nights when I didn't know if I'd make it home. I wore it while watching brothers fall. And now, here she thinks it's inappropriate." Renee squeezed his hand tighter. "Then don't give her that power. Be yourself. That's all that matters." The Callens weren't alone in noticing the shift after the jacket incident. A few neighbors who had stood watching that afternoon replayed the scene in their minds. Some admired Andre's calm restraint. Others whispered about Paula's overreach, but none spoke up openly, at least not yet. Meanwhile, Paula was busy writing her complaint. She sat at her kitchen counter that night, pen in hand, carefully citing the HOA guidelines she believed backed her argument. In her mind, this wasn't about disrespecting a veteran. It was about rules, appearances, and the kind of order she thought kept the community safe. The truth was Paula's obsession with control had roots, deeper than most knew. Years earlier, she had gone through a messy divorce that left her scrambling for stability. The HOA became her kingdom, her way of feeling powerful in a world where she often felt powerless. That clipboard wasn't just a tool. It was her shield. Andre didn't know that history, and frankly, it wouldn't have mattered. All he knew was that his jacket had become a battleground for something bigger than himself, but Paula's complaint was only the beginning, because once the words left her pen, they set off a chain of events that neither she nor Andre could have predicted. Saturday mornings in Greensboro usually carried a rhythm of their own. Lawnmowers droned, sprinklers ticked across yards, and the smell of bacon or pancakes drifted from open windows. That particular morning, Andre had taken his daughter Nia to the farmer's market downtown. She loved the stalls with homemade jams and jars of honey, and he enjoyed the chance to support local vendors. He was dressed casually, worn jeans, running shoes, and his old camouflage jacket. The jacket had been with him for over a decade, its fabric softened by time, the patches faint from sun and sand. To Andre, it was like a second skin. When they returned home, Nia bounded up the porch steps, carrying a paper bag filled with apples. Andre lingered by the driveway, adjusting the straps of another bag when he noticed movement across the street. Paula was there, standing with her clipboard. Her eyes locked on him as if she had been waiting for this moment. She crossed the street with purpose, heels clicking against the pavement. "Mr. Kalen," she called out, her tone clipped. Andre turned, already sensing the storm. Double quotes. "Yes, that jacket," she said, pointing at it with her pen as though it were a weapon. "It doesn't belong here. This neighborhood has standards. Military clothing is not appropriate." Andre blinked, caught between confusion and irritation. "It's a jacket," he replied evenly. "I've worn it for years. It's mine." Paula's voice rose slightly, just enough for nearby neighbors trimming hedges and walking dogs to hear. "This is a family neighborhood. That sort of clothing sends the wrong message. People don't feel safe when they see camouflage hanging around their street." From the porch, Nia called, "Daddy, are we going inside?" Her little voice trembled, sensing something wasn't right. Andre gave her a reassuring smile before turning back to Paula. "With respect, ma'am. I served in the U.S. Army for over 15 years. This jacket has been with me longer than any house I've lived in. It doesn't make anyone unsafe. It represents service." Paula scoffed. "I don't care what it represents. We have rules. I'll be submitting a formal complaint. If you care about fitting in, you'll take it off." The exchange drew more eyes. Harvey Simmons, the older neighbor who had tried once before to mediate Paula's zeal, slowly approached from his lawn. "Paula," he said carefully, "he's just standing in his own driveway. He's not bothering anyone." Paula snapped her head toward him. "Harvey, you don't understand. We have an image to maintain. If we let one person break standards, the whole place starts falling apart. First jackets, then who knows what else." Andre's voice carried a note of steel now, though he remained calm. "I've fought overseas, so people back here wouldn't have to worry about things like jackets. I lost friends who will never come home. You may think this is about appearances, but for me, it's about remembering them. I won't take it off because it makes you uncomfortable. Silence fell over the small crowd that had gathered. A neighbor pushing a stroller paused mid-step. A teenage boy leaned against a lamppost, his eyes wide. People weren't used to seeing anyone challenge Paula so directly. For a brief second, Paula hesitated. Her eyes flickered, unsure. But then, just as quickly, she regained her footing. "I'll put it in writing," she declared firmly. "This isn't about your service, Mr. Kalen. It's about rules. If you don't like them, maybe this isn't the right neighborhood for you." The words stung, and Andre felt heat rise in his chest. But instead of answering, he simply adjusted the strap of the bag on his shoulder and turned toward his house. "Come on, Naya," he said gently. His daughter took his hand, and together they walked inside. Renee, watching from the window, caught his eyes and saw the storm brewing beneath his calm exterior. She opened the door, ushering them in with a worried look. Once inside, Renee whispered, "What happened?" Andre sat down the bag slowly. "She thinks my jacket makes the neighborhood unsafe." Renee stared at him, incredulous. "Unsafe? You wore that jacket while protecting this country." Andre shrugged, though the weight of Paula's words pressed heavy on his shoulders. In her mind, the rules matter more than the people living under them. From the window, he could still see Paula scribbling furiously on her clipboard before marching back toward her corner house. Neighbors drifted away, murmuring among themselves. Some looked embarrassed, others curious. Andre exhaled deeply, his hands gripping the edge of the kitchen counter. "I thought I left this kind of fight behind when I left the army," he said softly. Renee wrapped her arms around him, steadying him. "You don't need to fight her. Just live your life." That's the best answer. He wanted to believe her. But something inside told him that Paula wasn't finished, and that this jacket had sparked a fire she wasn't going to let burn out quietly. But Paula's complaint wasn't just paperwork. It was a match tossed into dry grass, and soon the whole neighborhood would feel the heat. Paula didn't waste time. By Monday morning, she had already drafted a 3-page complaint addressed to the HOA board. Every line carried her familiar tone, sharp, self-assured, sprinkled with references to community standards and the preservation of neighborhood harmony. She cited obscure clauses from the handbook, twisting them into support for her argument that Andre's jacket presented an intimidating presence. Copies of the complaint were slid into the mailboxes of every household on the street. Paula liked to make things public. It gave her the advantage of framing the story before anyone else could. By the afternoon, whispers started spreading. And by evening, most neighbors had read her words. Andre found out when his wife Renee opened their mailbox. She unfolded the crisp packet and read aloud at the kitchen table, her voice trembling with disbelief. She's saying your jacket could discourage families with young children from feeling comfortable outdoors. Renee tossed the papers down, shaking her head. This isn't just nitpicking anymore. She's painting you like some kind of threat. Andre read it for himself, jaw tightening as his eyes scanned the lines. He wasn't surprised Paula followed through. But seeing his name printed like that, as though he were a danger to his own neighbors, hit differently. "She's not going to stop," he muttered. "This is about control." The next day, the issue spilled into the open. A few neighbors gathered near the cul-de-sac as kids played tag in the street. Paula stood with her clipboard under one arm, casually reminding people to check their mailboxes. She spoke in her usual authoritative tone, as though her word carried official weight. Andre stepped outside to wheel the trash bin to the curb. The air shifted again, just as it had during the jacket confrontation. Conversations hushed. Eyes followed him. Some sympathetic, some uncertain, others carefully neutral. Paula seized the moment. "Kalen," she called out loud enough for everyone to hear. "Have you had a chance to review the complaint I submitted? It's very clear this community has guidelines, and your clothing violates them." Andre paused, his hand on the trash bin handle. He could feel Renee watching from the porch and little Nia peeking from behind the curtains. The entire cul-de-sac had become an audience. He walked slowly toward Paula. Double quotes, yes, I saw it, he said firmly but calmly. And I'll say again, it's a jacket. My jacket. I wore it while serving this country. There's no rule that says I can't wear it. You may not like how it looks, but that doesn't make it wrong. Paula's chin lifted. Neighborhood appearance isn't about personal preference. It's about protecting property values. If potential buyers see people wearing combat gear, they'll think the area is unsafe. Harvey Simmons, standing nearby with his dog's leash, finally spoke up. Combat gear, Paula? It's just a jacket. He's not patrolling the street with a rifle. Let the man wear what he wants. Paula gave him a cold smile. Harvey, if you don't care about your property's value, that's your choice. Some of us take pride in this community. Andre shook his head slowly. You talk about pride, but you don't understand mine. You don't understand what this jacket means. You think it's fabric. To me, it's memory, sacrifice, and respect for those who didn't come back. You think I'm lowering property values? I wore this while defending your right to complain. Murmurs rippled through the neighbors. A few shifted uncomfortably. One woman whispered to another, "She's gone too far this time." Paula felt the balance slipping and raised her voice. Rules are rules, Mr. Kalen. If you can't follow them, perhaps this isn't the right place for your family. Andre held her gaze, his voice steady but carrying weight. We moved here to build a home, not to be told who we can or can't be. My family belongs here as much as anyone else's. If you don't see that, that's your problem, not mine. For a moment, silence gripped the group. Children paused mid-game, sensing the tension. Paula's expression hardened, but behind her eyes, something flickered. Doubt, maybe even embarrassment. She quickly masked it. Fine, she said stiffly. The board will handle this. She turned on her heel and walked briskly back toward her house, heels striking the pavement like gavel hits. Andre let out a slow breath, then turned back toward his driveway. Renee met him halfway, her hand brushing his arm. You handled that well, she whispered, though her eyes betrayed her worry. Handled or not, Andre replied quietly. This isn't over. Neighbors drifted away, conversations buzzing in hushed tones. Some avoided Andre's eyes, others offered small nods of support, but none spoke openly. The line between silence and solidarity hadn't been crossed yet. Inside their home, Andre sat at the table, staring at the jacket folded neatly over the back of a chair. He thought of the brothers and sisters who had worn the same colors in places far harsher than this neighborhood. They had each other's backs without hesitation. Here he was alone, at least for now. But word of the confrontation wouldn't stop at the end of the street. Because beyond this cul-de-sac, Andre had people who never forgot what he meant to them. And when they heard, they weren't going to stay quiet. By Wednesday evening, the jacket confrontation had become the talk of the neighborhood. Some residents avoided Andre entirely, slipping back into their homes whenever he appeared outside. Others gave him polite smiles that carried a trace of pity, as though they felt bad, but didn't dare say so out loud. A few offered more subtle waves, quick comments about hanging in there. Whispered assurances that Paula didn't speak for everyone. Renee noticed the shift while walking Nia to the bus stop. A young mother named Tessa Monroe leaned in as the kids lined up. I saw what happened the other day, she murmured. For what it's worth, I think she's wrong. Your husband shouldn't have to apologize for his service. Renee appreciated the words, but sensed the caution behind them. Nobody wanted to be on Paula's bad side. For years, Paula had controlled the narrative. People tolerated her because she made herself difficult to oppose. A single complaint from her could spiral into fines, hearings, or endless nagging. Most figured it was easier to keep their heads down. At the Kalon home, the tension was heavier. Andre sat at the kitchen table in the evenings, his jacket folded neatly over the chair beside him, as though its presence gave him strength. Naya would sometimes reach for it, asking questions he found hard to answer. "Daddy, why doesn't Mrs. Greaves like your jacket? Did you do something wrong?" Andre knelt by her chair, holding her small hand in his. "No, baby, I didn't do anything wrong. Some people don't understand what things mean to others. This jacket, it reminds me of friends who were really brave. It's not about being scary. It's about remembering." Nia nodded slowly, though confusion lingered in her eyes. Renee stood nearby, arms crossed, her expression caught between anger and sorrow. She hated that her daughter had to carry these questions. Later that night, Renee said what she'd been holding back. "Andre, this isn't just about a jacket anymore. She's making you out to be something you're not. And people are listening." Andre's voice was steady, but his words carried weight. "I know, and I can handle her. What I can't accept is Nia growing up thinking her father has to shrink himself to keep people comfortable." The next HOA meeting was scheduled for Friday at the community clubhouse. By Thursday, everyone knew the jacket would be on the agenda. Paula made sure of it, casually reminding neighbors that a very serious standards issue needed to be addressed. Andre debated whether to attend. Renee urged him to skip it, fearing an ambush. But Andre had faced bigger battles than a room full of homeowners. And something inside told him that silence would only make things worse. Friday evening came, and the clubhouse parking lot filled quickly. Folding chairs lined the meeting room, neighbors chatting in hushed tones until Paula arrived, papers clutched in her hands. She took her place at the front like a judge about to preside over a trial. Andre entered quietly, his presence drawing every eye. He wore the jacket not as defiance, but as truth. He took a seat near the back, Renee at his side. Her fingers laced tightly with his dot. Paula began with routine business. Budget reports, landscaping contracts, but her impatience was visible. Finally, she cleared her throat. "Now, on to a matter that concerns the safety and appearance of our neighborhood. As you all know, Mr. Kalin has chosen to wear military attire that gives the wrong impression of our community." A low murmur rippled through the room. Some shifted uncomfortably, others leaned forward, eager for drama. Andre raised his hand. "I'd like to respond." Paula stiffened but forced a smile. Of course, he stood, the jacket settling naturally on his shoulders. His voice was calm, but carried to every corner of the room. "This jacket isn't a threat. It's not a uniform meant to intimidate anyone here. It's a part of me. I wore it while serving this country, and it reminds me of friends who didn't make it back. If that makes some people uncomfortable, I can't change that. But I won't erase who I am to fit into someone else's picture of what this community should look like." The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the creak of a chair. Harvey Simmons spoke up, his voice gravelly but firm. "He's right. We've let one person's rules run this neighborhood for too long. It's a jacket. A man's right to wear what he wants should mean something, especially when he's earned it." Paula's face flushed, but she pressed on. "We have guidelines." Another voice cut in, sharper this time. "Guidelines don't cover jackets, Paula." It was Janet Reyes, who had lived 2 doors down from Paula for years. "You're twisting rules to suit your own opinion." The tide shifted in that moment. Neighbors who had been silent began speaking one after another. Some timid, some bold, but all chipping away at Paula's authority. For once, her voice wasn't the only one filling the room. Andre remained standing, steady and composed as the discussion spiraled away from him and toward Paula's leadership. He didn't need to argue anymore. The truth was speaking for itself. Still, he knew this wouldn't end neatly. Paula wasn't the type to back down without finding another way to reassert control.